I'm a Canadian Red Cross certified first aid and CPR instructor. But for those of you who know me well, you know, I'm an avid concert goer. So, I have a question for you. If you could save a life at a concert and get noticed by your favorite singer or band, would you? See a lot of nodding over here. If you were to ask me and many other people, my answer would be absolutely yes. But unfortunately, people don't do that during emergencies. I actually had the experience of almost saving a girl and almost got noticed by my favorite band. In September, I went to the Måneskin concert with my friend. So the crowd standing next to me were filled with excitement. Everybody formed a little circle, having their flashlight on their phone on. I thought, wait, did Victoria DeAngelis just crowd surf to us? My dream was about to come true. But people did not seem to be that excited. So I tapped the shoulder of the girl standing next to me and asked her, hey, what's going on? She looked at me in panic and said, a girl has just fainted in the audience. Understanding this is an emergency and being trained in first aid, I surfed through the crowd and got to the center of the circle. I asked her, hey, how can I help? Because she already regained her consciousness. And then she told me how she was feeling and other stuff. So what ended up happening was I decided to put her into recovery position. But before I was about to do that, a paramedic personnel came over and thanked me for my help. Luckily, nothing big happened. We were both able to go back to enjoying our concert. But seriously, how can you help during an emergency? There are 3 things I want you to remember. First is to recognize the emergency and assign responsibilities to people. The bystander effect describes the phenomenon where people don't tend to help others during an emergency. It's composed of 2 parts. Part 1 is called the pluralistic ignorance, which describes that if nobody in a crowd is acting to help the victim, then everybody assumes this is probably not an emergency. Part 2 is called the diffusion of responsibility, which describes that individuals in a crowd tend to not help others and assume someone else is going to do it. Like this person said here, let somebody else help him, not me, because they might be a doctor, they might be more qualified, and these are dangerous to the victim. So to decrease the bystander effect, you have to recognize the emergency by saying words such as, this is an emergency, someone has just fainted. And you need to assign responsibilities to people by singling out an individual so they can diffuse it out to people. Something like, hey, you in the black shirt, Joe, yes, call 911, get a first aid kit and AED. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Which brings me to the second point. Be confident and assertive when you're assigning responsibilities, just like what I did to Joe. Why? Well, Stanley Milgram answered this question. So he conducted an experiment about obedience. In this experiment, the experimenter gave order and acted as an authority figure. The teachers were the participants they recruited, and the learners were Confederate, but the teachers didn't know that. Basically, the teachers had to read out a word list for the learners to repeat, and whenever the learner repeated something wrong, the teachers were instructed to give them an electric shock. The shock is fake, but again, the teacher didn't know. It turns out that if the experimenter looks like an authority figure, such as wearing a white coat, speaking in a very confident, assertive, and gave very clear instructions, then the teachers were more likely to obey the order. So that is why when an authority figure like Beyonce looked at you in the eye, point you out in the audience and say, look around, everybody on mute, you are more likely to obey her because she's the queen. But that being said, in an emergency, we're not going to shock people or do a mute challenge. But instead, if you're very confident and assertive in your order, when you're assigning responsibility to a bystander, they're more likely to listen to you and save the victim. Last point is to refresh your first aid skills periodically. Herman Ebbinghaus has done an experiment on himself and found out that the most forgetting occurs right after you learn something. So that's why when you take a first aid class, your instructor gives you lots of practice, such as scenario questions and multiple choices right after you learn something, so you don't forget and retain your knowledge. And you actually have to recertify in standard first aid and CPR every 3 years to make sure your skills are up to date. In fact, for healthcare providers, they are trained in higher level of first aid, such as basic life support. And this needs to be recertified every single year to make sure their knowledge are up to date. Because after all, they're the people who do the most heavy lifting of life-saving in our society. Now you might ask me, wait, but what if I'm the victim? Well, what I want you to remember are pretty much the same as how can you help as a bystander. First, you need to tell people that you're having an emergency. And you need to be confident and assertive when you're assigning responsibility to others to make sure they can help you and listen to you. Third, you have to refresh your knowledge periodically to make sure you understand what's going on and what to do. Use your common sense and call 911 if needed. I just want to end off my presentation with a public service announcement. Stay hydrated before you go to concert because preventative medicine is the key. Thank you very much.